FIFA boss Gianni Infantino is a man under fire. His plan to sell off a stake in the World Cup collapsed under pressure this week, and our football's regional governing bodies want answers. But Infantino has a friend in the White House, Donald Trump. So, did the US president have a hand in this deal, and can Infantino survive what comes next? Europe's football governing body, UEFA, put it bluntly. It's lost confidence in FIFA's leadership, adding it wasn't alone. UEFA's statement pulled no punches. We cannot keep going on like this with secret schemes on fast-track timescales cooked up by faceless individuals and of dubious benefit to the game. Now, let's take a closer look at the secret scheme UEFA is referring to. Infantino wanted to create a new company to run the World Cup and other major tournaments. Outside investors would buy stakes in it. The lead investor was a venture capital firm founded by Joshua Kushner, who's the brother of Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. We're joined now by Victor Matheson, professor of economics and accounting at Holy Cross University and one of the leading experts on the economics of mega events and global sports governance. And he'll break down the financial logic and the financial madness behind Infantino's failed plan. Good to have you with us, Victor. Now, UEFA's statement referred to FIFA having reserves of over $5 billion. So why has Infantino pushed so hard on an additional revenue stream?
Let's be clear, I'm very much on the side of UEFA here and not on the side of Infantino here. There are only a couple reasons to bring private investment money into a company. One is if you think this investment firm can more efficiently run the business that you're in rather than the existing people. Well, that's not the case here. There's no evidence that these new investors know anything about running a World Cup. The other thing is, let's imagine you need a bunch of money now and you're willing to sacrifice some of your future in order to get that money now. Well, that's another reason why you might want to do something like this. But no one has suggested that FIFA is lacking resources to make the investments it needs right now in the game. No one thinks that there are any major capital projects that can be done around the world that need money now, and specifically need money now that FIFA can't already raise on its own. So there were gigantic red flags with this whole thing to start with. The only one that seems to really be in a position to be much better off by a huge inflow of money now are the people currently running FIFA or currently running national associations. Of course, they would rather have the money now than leave those revenues on the table for future FIFA presidents.
I mean, the FIFA 2026 World Cup was already profitable, but I'm just wondering, what's wrong with more money?
So there is nothing wrong with more money. And as a matter of fact, Infantino himself has actually been pretty politically savvy here. He said, look, I know that people are concerned about how expensive the World Cup is and how much the World Cup has been monetized, but we're FIFA, we're here for the good of the game, and this money we're earning, it's a means to an end, right? And the end is promoting soccer or football worldwide. The issue here, though, is when this new plan isn't generating new revenue for FIFA, it's just moving future revenue that FIFA was going to be earning and put it in the hands of the people running FIFA now. This is not something that makes FIFA more money over time. It simply changes the hands with whom that are going to be actually controlling the funds by moving funds from the future to now.
All right, point noted. We heard, as I mentioned, UEFA, Europe's football governing body, but also CONCACAF, that's representing North America, Asia's AFC. They all categorically rejected the plan. But some other confederations didn't push back. What was in it for them?
So again, remember, the money coming in now doesn't just come into Infantino's pockets. It also would be then spread out throughout the rest of the world, right? And so the folks who are currently presidents of national associations, again, also just like current leadership in FIFA, stands to get a bunch of money now in exchange for lower amounts of money in the future. But that's okay if you're president now, right? I don't care whether the future president of a soccer federation in Asia or Africa has less money. I care about the money that I can have right now. And so you can understand why this is tempting for them. But for confederations, especially UEFA, but others who have their own soccer interests, for example, like the Euro Cup in mind, there's real concern that bringing in profit-minded investors is not necessarily good for the game and is not necessarily good for the revenues of confederations like CONCACAF or UEFA. Lots of additional pressure, for example, if you have for-profit investors to maybe move the World Cup to an every 2-year cycle. That would be good for FIFA, but bad for UEFA. And so I think UEFA saw some of that writing on the wall.
Right. As I've mentioned, Infantino is up against the wall. But we mentioned those smaller and less wealthy federations. They might not have the finances, but they do have the numbers. Do you expect Infantino to lean towards them for support, especially at this desperate time?
Right, and of course, this is what Infantino's been very good at, and this is why, as near as a week ago, he was considered an absolute lock, or as close to a lock as you could be in a political world, of being reelected this fall and winter for another term as presidency, because he has just overseen the most financially successful World Cup in history, and quite honestly, from a soccer or football standpoint, also a spectacular tournament, and so he was riding high because with all that revenue, he has a lot of money to hand out to folks across the world and essentially buy votes, and which is fine. That being said, when UEFA says, hey, we're not coming, it's not much of a World Cup without the European countries. And on top of that, the World Cup survives on the idea that the professional clubs have to release the best players in order to play in the World Cup, or else they get fined by their local federations. Well, if Europe says, look, we're not coming, and we are telling our clubs within Europe, you do not have to release your players, that's not much of a World Cup at all, right? None of the European teams and none of the great players from outside of Europe who are playing on European teams. That's all of a sudden not a World Cup at all.
All right. But what does this whole saga tell us about the financial power balance in global football?
So I think it says is that Infantino saw that he had done very well in FIFA and in the World Cup, and was trying to leverage his success in the World Cup to push his power further, figuring that he was such a lock and he was so beloved worldwide for how well he had run this World Cup, that he would be able to use this power to push through anything he wanted. I think what we've shown here is, he doesn't have, an iron fist that he controls all of FIFA that way. And I don't think I can remember any politician's fortunes changing this rapidly from, again, 100% chance of success a week ago, and by his own doing, now is facing some real political headwinds. There's every reason to think he doesn't get reelected here in 6 months.
I suppose one thing that makes football unique is that it's seen as the people's game. FIFA has the custodianship, but the people actually own the game. But FIFA has a very different structure from other sports. And I'm just wondering, are there any lessons to be learned from how other major sports leagues have handled private equity tie-ups?
I think you've really hit on the difference here, right? Is that we don't get too uptight when private equity comes into soccer clubs, because they've always been owned, or at least often been owned, by rich owners, right? No one gets mad when Rob McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds come and buy Wrexham and pour some money into that club, right? So we've always understood that individual clubs can be the playthings of rich billionaires. Although there are places like Real Madrid and Barcelona that are owned by the fans. But that's not the issue with FIFA. FIFA is supposed to be the guardian of the game. It's not even a for-profit corporation, right? It's a nonprofit that is supposed to be maximizing the good of the game. And again, any money they make on the World Cup, that's a means to an end. But what Infantino said is, no, we're going to change that. And FIFA is now not about soccer. It's about maximizing money, and the money becomes the end in and of itself.
I'm glad you brought up that distinction between the sort of club football and the international game. And I'm just wondering, is there a version of private investment that can private investment in the commercial rights of international football, like we've seen with the World Cup, that wouldn't trigger the kind of backlash we're seeing right now?
So possibly, right? Certainly, you don't want a deal that's been done in the back room secretly, and then is all of a sudden thrown upon the 200 different national confederations saying, oh, yes, we have to vote on this in the next month. So if Infantino had said, we should consider whether a current influx of a large amount of capital in exchange for giving up some of our future revenues would be a good thing in general for soccer federations around the world, and have an open discussion about whether this is the direction we want to go, and decide whether, as a group and out in the open, whether, taking a more direct idea of trying to maximize more profits is worth doing. But I think what we saw here is doing that in secret is certainly not what you want to do. I think also this was hurt by the fact that explicitly one of Trump's allies is part of this, right? I think Infantino simply misunderstood or underestimated how deeply unpopular Trump is worldwide. Thought that, look, this is a good name associated with Trump. Of course, everyone's going to agree with this. But no, he's not popular in the United States, and he's much less popular in most of the rest of the world.
Victor Matheson, it's been great getting your perspective on this. Thank you for speaking to us. Now, many of our viewers are asking if the president himself had any role in this. Reporters put that to him directly.
First, Mr. Infantino speak to you about their proposal to sell a stake in the World Cup, and is that something you support?
About who?
Did FIFA or Mr. Infantino speak to you about their proposal to sell a stake in the World Cup?
No, I never spoke to him.
Mr. President.
Karim Zidane is an award-winning investigative journalist who's spent the past decade at the intersection of sports and politics, and he's also the author of the upcoming book, The Ultimate Strongman, a deep investigation into how powerful leaders weaponize sport. It's good to have you with us, Karim. Now, Donald Trump, they're denied speaking to Infantino about the plan. Does that hold up, given how close the two men have been?
It's difficult to believe anything Donald Trump says. On the one hand, it is very possible that this was all done in secret. But on the other hand, given that this involves Joshua Kushner, whose brother is Jared Kushner, son-in-law to Donald Trump himself, and that this involves some money, I highly doubt that Donald Trump was not aware of this whatsoever. But given that it's not going so well, it does not surprise me in the slightest that he's trying to distance himself from it.
Do we know much about Joshua Kushner's firm or the other investors behind the deal and what they were actually meant to do in practice?
Joshua, as I mentioned, is the younger brother of Jared Kushner, and he is the founder of this venture capital fund called Thrive. Now, Thrive is worth over $5 billion now, and that's because he was an early investor in things like Instagram, Spotify, Slack, OpenAI, I mean, you name it. And he's received significant investment from banks like Goldman Sachs. So that is at least reportedly speaking, the primary investor that FIFA was going to be negotiating with. Whether it is because of some exceptional business acumen that they have, I highly doubt it. It's specifically because Gianni Infantino, FIFA's president, has been so ingrained in the Donald Trump orbit that it doesn't surprise me at all that this would be the first offering, is to try and get Donald Trump to profit off FIFA and off the world of football.
Interesting. So an opaque process in terms of selecting this group. FIFA also valued this, whatever was to come out of this company, at 20 billion. Do we know where that number came from?
It's difficult to assess at the moment because the FIFA does not operate with any sort of transparency. As a matter of fact, this wasn't, released information by FIFA itself. This was the work of exceptional reporters like Martin Ziegler, and that is the only reason we know about this to begin with, and that people have had enough time to sort of rally a rebellion of sorts against this proposed project. The truth is, this is very typical of FIFA. They operate in secrecy. They operate without transparency. This predates Gianni Infantino. This is an organization steeped in corruption and ingrained in a patronage system that continues to operate to this very day. So the $20 billion could be a very serious figure. It could be a completely invented figure. In many ways, these sums are supposed to be alluring to the small federations within FIFA. That's because FIFA's 211 members all have the same one vote. So if the FIFA president, being Gianni Infantino, is relying on these votes to be voted back into office, which he would be next year, he does not need to ingratiate himself to the major players like England, to Germany, to France. He is going for those small member federations in Africa who don't have this kind of money. So when you start offering them millions upon millions of dollars, it's going to be very hard for them to say no.
Let's talk a bit more about Infantino himself. He's been present at a number of Trump events unrelated to football. We saw him at Trump's inauguration. We saw him at the Board of Peace event. Do you think these are all sort of related to this deal, or is there more or is there something else that he was aiming for?
I think, while I can't speak to Gianni Infantino's personal politics, I think there are very significant foundational correlations between him and Donald Trump in terms of their ideology. FIFA, and especially in the past decade with Gianni Infantino, has presented itself as a harbinger of peace. This organization, I mean, it's in the slogan, football unites the world. They legitimately believe that they can operate in a space where politicians themselves have regularly failed, and that's to bring peace in very different regions of the world. This was Gianni Infantino's hallmark. He views himself as a peacemaker and a statesman more than he does just another sports executive. And he was brought into FIFA. He was voted in, believe it or not, as a reformer on a reform agenda. Very similar to Donald Trump, who, came through this populist mechanism, presenting himself as the person who was going to destroy the establishment. So they bonded. And by the way, they also got elected around the same time. So they've been bonding for a very, very long time, and they have these commonalities amongst them. And this is exactly why Gianni Infantino has remained in Donald Trump's orbit. When he attends things like the Gaza Peace Summit and sits there with the MAGA hat on, he is expressing to the world that he is no longer just a football executive. He is a player in Donald Trump's world of peace, no matter how ironic or ridiculous or hypocritical that actually sounds.
As we mentioned, you focus on this intersection between sports and politics, and you study this across different sports. Is there something from this Infantino-Trump relationship that you would say kind of fits the bill from what the patterns you've seen in all these different sports?
There is only one correlation that I can come up with that's as significant or close to being as significant as Gianni Infantino's relationship with Donald Trump, and that's Donald Trump's relationship with the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC president Dana White. Now, this is a relationship that has, extended for more than 2 decades now, but was really significant as of Trump's first presidency. Now, Dana White actually took to the stage of the Republican National Convention not once, not twice, but 3 times to support Donald Trump. Him and various UFC fighters have campaigned for Donald Trump significantly. Dana White is the reason Donald Trump started appearing on so-called manosphere podcasts, really ingratiating himself to young, apolitical and apathetic men, which which in turn helped him regain the presidency in 2024. So the UFC and Dana White have been remarkably significant, and Donald Trump in turn has rewarded the organization. At the start of the World Cup, the other major event going on was a UFC event on the lawn of the White House, which had never happened before. And for many people would probably have never fathomed such a thing ever occurring. But this was in many ways a reward for the UFC, elevating it from what was once an ostracized organization seen as a just barbaric blood sport to a organization that is now a primary sport in the United States, an American pastime now. So the cultural significance is very, very powerful. And in turn, Donald Trump gets to present himself as a strong man and utilize this combat sport to further his America First agenda. Now, this all sounds very similar to what he's done with Gianni Infantino. In many ways, Gianni Infantino has managed to last this long as an ally of Donald Trump, because remember, there are many who don't, like Elon Musk. A, because he's a world-class sycophant, and B, because he's been able to sort of dangle all sorts of carrots in front of Trump. Things like awarding him a completely fabricated FIFA Peace Prize, for example, all because Donald Trump hadn't received the Nobel Peace Prize. He understood that by stroking Trump's ego, he'd be able to further his own interests with FIFA and to secure a World Cup that would end up becoming a record-breaking in terms of revenue. So they all came out of this winners in the end. As to what happens next, we'll see.
Right. So in light of all that, did this move to sort of sell off the stake of the World Cup, did that then surprise you?
I think Infantino has sort of operated over the last 6 weeks, 2 months, even longer, maybe, let's say the last year, so closely within Donald Trump's orbit that it's become a bubble of sorts. I think he legitimately viewed himself as untouchable. He even started mimicking a lot of Donald Trump's personality traits, whether it be his complete disdain for the media. I mean, it was only just recently that Infantino took to Instagram to complain about the media, saying it's really our fault that, people have any sort of negative perceptions about FIFA, not his. This is the exact calling card of Donald Trump. So in many ways, it doesn't surprise me that we've arrived at this point. Gianni Infantino seems to believe he's untouchable, and I think he's learning just over this past week that that's far from true.
Do you think he'll survive?
I think he still can survive, mainly because of two things. FIFA is an extraordinarily corrupt entity. It needs an entire reboot rather than just not even sort of minimal reforms or the removal of Infantino. So the mechanisms within the organization that could allow him to stay on, being that patronage system and the corruption and the lack of transparency, those still exist, and it's a matter of seeing how well he can fight back. The thing is, I don't think he has Donald Trump on his side anymore. If anything, the fact that Donald Trump hasn't come out and spoken in favor of Infantino or tried to defend him in any way, shape, or form speaks to the fact that Donald Trump is the first person to betray people or to throw them off a cliff once they're no longer useful to him. Now, he sees somebody who was once untouchable, the most powerful man in the world of football, who could have potentially made the Trump family a lot of money. Within a week's time, Gianni Infantino is facing sort of a massive rebellion, could be removed from his position, and that potential for profit is all but gone. That to him is the sign of a loser, and Donald Trump hates losers. So Infantino's on his own now.
Okay, Karim Zidane, thank you very much for giving us your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me.
And what do you think about Gianni Infantino's efforts to sell a stake in the World Cup to private investors? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching.